Although the most popular stories surrounding the extraterrestrial phenomena tend to focus on the topics of alien abduction, sightings of extraterrestrial craft or supernatural occurrences featuring humanoid creatures, many UFO researchers often forget that some of the strongest pieces of evidence of extraterrestrial intervention appears to center around the disappearance of cattle and subsequent damage to livestock. So today I'll be talking about the strange link between thousands of cattle disappearances across the world and impossible to explain surgical procedures that took place in ways that would be humanly impossible with modern day technologies. The earliest known written record of bizarre animal surgeries and sudden disappearance of a large number of livestock comes from an official document dated sometime during the early 1600s, when an investigator for the court of James I of England claimed that impossible to explain mass expirations of sheep were being recorded all across London and nearby shires. It was originally believed that the sudden expirations of the sheep could have been caused by neighbouring farms competing in market production, alongside hungry travellers that were committing theft as they travelled throughout London, of which was the most heavily populated region during the 1600s. However, when the investigations took place, evidence was found that seemed to reject the original hypothesis. According to the court investigator, the sheep were found to have expired through causes that were otherwise impossible to attribute to human activity. Their organs, meat and fleeces remained untouched, with only evidence of possible tallow removal, though not confirmed, and blood having been completely drained from the animal with no spillages surrounding the body. Even more difficult to explain was the sheer number of sheep that suddenly expired. The investigator wrote that in some cases, there were more than 100 sheep that suddenly passed away, and no evidence of footprints, tracks or spillages that could point towards a group of people having perpetrated the crime. When the investigator asked around the local regions that were at the epicenter of this series of sheep disappearances and expirations, many attributed the sight of fireworks nearby to have been the possible cause. Some believed that the fireworks could have scared the sheep and caused them to pass away in fright, whereas others believed that the lights they'd seen in the sky could have had a more sinister purpose. The court ended the investigation with the following comment: about the City of London and some of the shires adjoining, whole expirations of sheep have been made, in some places to number 100, in others less, when nothing is taken from the sheep but their tallow and some inward parts, the whole carcasses and fleece remaining still behind. Of this sundry conjectures, but most agree that it tendeth towards some fireworks." End quote. The phenomenon would continue for several decades before ending entirely. The most interesting aspect of these sheep disappearances, however, seemed to bear remarkable resemblance to modern-day cattle disappearances and possible extraterrestrial intervention. When researching into mass livestock expirations, it became obvious that cattle disappearances and surgeries are a fairly recent development, with the first recorded instances beginning during the 1800s to modern day. It's theorized that the sudden change of livestock being targeted from sheep to now cattle appears to match directly with the world market and primary source of meat production during these times. When sheep disappearances, surgeries and unexplained expirations were occurring, the main meat export around the world centered around sheep populations. It's only been over the last couple of centuries that the role of cattle has slowly changed for the purpose of meat consumption. During the 1600s to the late 1700s, when recorded instances of sheep expirations were occurring, cattle were predominantly used for labour and secondarily used for milk production. Eating the meat of cattle, creating leather from their hide, or using their bones for objects were only the product of a cattle that had passed away due to natural causes or old age. Could it be that extraterrestrial visitors switched from now studying sheep from around the world to now modern-day cattle, to better understand the main meat consumption diets of our entire species? The earliest known study into cattle expirations began in the state of Ohio back in 1966, when an investigator known as John Keel began to look into a series of unexplainable cases that were recorded around the upper Ohio River Valley. The cattle seemed to have passed away due to bizarre circumstances that were otherwise impossible to have occurred naturally. Instances of animal autopsies showed that a number of cattle had passed away shortly after falling from a great height, despite the fact that the pastures were wide expanses of flat, endless land with no heights great enough to have caused the injuries recorded. Other instances noted that the cattle appeared to have been cut up with precision tools that created perfectly straight lines in the livestock in their thick hides that would have required special surgical equipment. A list of consistent findings were the following. Many of the livestock explorations were made with clean surgical cuts that would have required precise tools and equipment. Many of the cattle found had been completely drained of blood, showed no sign of spillage in the surrounding area or any form of clotting surrounding their wounds. Over 90% of the cattle that was targeted was between the age of 4 to 5 years old. No footprints, spillages, tracks, or even evidence of any animal nearby could be found. These discoveries and subsequent livestock investigations stayed within the farming communities for several decades, without the general public aware of the events until the 1970s, when investigators began to uncover bizarre findings. The investigation that became publicized surrounding strange animal surgeries was the famous event known as the Lady Incident, that occurred on the 9th of September back in 1967. According to the King family, Harry King, the son of Agnes King, found the family of their 3-year-old horse named Lady. The skin surrounding the head and neck of the animal had been completely removed with cuts that were far too precise to have been caused by a predator. Blood was not at the scene, and there were absolutely no tracks of any kind surrounding the body, including Lady's horse tracks that suddenly disappeared more than 100 feet from the body, as if the animal had been running but was lifted off the ground. Oddly enough, several small holes were punched into the ground, as if there were sharp poles that carried a substantial weights that landed nearby, and 2 large bushes had been found crushed completely flat. When the story surrounding the Lady incident was published in the local paper, it was the first ever recorded livestock investigation that had been associated with a possible extraterrestrial encounter. Following investigations grew to be far more peculiar. In June of 1976, when investigating the sudden expiration of a 3-year-old cow in the Rio Arriba County of New Mexico, investigators discovered what was described as a trail of suction cup-like impressions that led away from the recovered body. These impressions in the ground appeared to be in tripod form, with each cup being roughly 4 inches in diameter, 28 inches apart, and suddenly disappeared around 500 feet away from the body of the young cow, with no other signs of tracks surrounding the animal. Although skeptics originally believed the incident was playing off heightened fears of extraterrestrial causes, with a perpetrator appearing to have used a contraption to have created the indentations on purpose, with no other signs of a classic livestock case, similar incidents with suction cup-like indentations would be found all across the state following the Rio Arriba incident. 2 years later, within the same state of New Mexico, a case involving an 11-month-old bull would bring the livestock investigations a substantial piece of evidence of something not of this world interfering with the animals and their genetic makeup. According to the reports made on the 24th of March back in 1978, Mr. Manuel Gomez of Dulce, New Mexico, alerted the New Mexican police of his prized 11-month-old bull having been the victim of a coordinated attack. When the police investigated the body, they found consistent details matching past investigations, such as precise cuts that would have been made only with precision instruments and surgical equipment, its reproductive organs completely removed and a lack of blood to be found anywhere on the scene. On top of these consistent reports, the police found another peculiar aspect surrounding the bull, when the team began looking at the organs for signs of predators of surgical markings. According to the New Mexican police officer Gabriel L. Verderes, they were quoted as saying the following: "Both the liver and heart were quite white and mushy. Both organs had the texture and consistency of peanut butter." End quote. Although the police officer could not have known at the time what the discovery entailed, Today in the medical field we are familiar with what's referred to as ghost hearts. A ghost heart is a heart that's been completely decellularized, with all of the red blood cells and blood vessels removed from the heart, giving it a white, almost transparent ghostly appearance. The only time a human heart is turned into a ghost heart is to prepare the heart for a donor transplant, to prevent the body from rejecting the heart due to incompatible blood cells, or a reaction from the antigens of the blood from the donor cells. In essence, this means the blood was drained from the animal to such an extent that the organs underwent a decellularization process. Shortly after this find, the FBI took over the investigation and sent the organs to 2 independent private research laboratories to study the samples and bring back any information surrounding their chemical composition. In the research file, the FBI document outlines the following. The liver was checked against a healthy food market liver which showed a difference. The 11th-month-old bull's liver contained no copper, and 4 times the amount of phosphorus, zinc and potassium. No explanation for this condition is available. Also, the blood which came off the nose when it was presumably dropped was light pink in colour. This blood did not clot after several days. The hide on the animal was brittle and felt to touch like parchment paper. Flesh underneath the hide was pinkish in colour. A probable explanation for the pinkish blood is a control type of radiation, used to expire the animal according to radiation experts. The red corpuscles are destroyed, leaving the pale pinkish colour. All of the toxicological findings on the blood are negative, because of the dissemination of the radiation. It's believed that this type of radiation is not harmful to humans, although approximately 7 people who visited the site complained of nausea and headaches." End quote. With this finding, it becomes obvious that the sudden expiration of the livestock are not caused by the average citizen performing a hoax, or any kind of wildlife or predator, as the instruments needed are so precise and the perpetrators have demonstrated the use of radiation capabilities that surpass even modern-day understandings of targeted radiation effects. Additionally, there appears to be a consistent harvesting of organs related to reproduction, organs relating to dietary processes and large amounts of blood, all of which would be necessary for detailed studies of an animal, its diet, its hormone levels, its quality of health and any additional data required. This could very well mean that the cause for such livestock interferences from extraterrestrial intelligence could be detailed large-scale studies over generations surrounding our food production, domesticated animals and the dietary changes of our population. So what do you think of the strange link between livestock disappearances and unidentified flying objects? Do you have your own theories as to what could be the connection? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below, and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.